Dan gaan we nu over naar het echte programma. En we hebben vandaag, zoals gezegd, 2 keynotes. De eerste keynote is Aral Balkan. And I'll switch to English because Aral is doing his talk in English as well. Aral is an architect and designer who's been coding from a very early age 7. And he's the founder of a company called Indie. It's a tiny social enterprise that practices ethical design. And he's built some programs like Heartbeat to do social communication in a private way. I saw the launch of that product last year at the T2 conference in Finland. So I'm interested to know what has happened since then. So the floor is yours, Aral Balkan.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you very much. Clouds. They seem to be the only thing that we talk about in technology these days, right? And you can kind of see why. I mean, they are these cute, lovable, cuddly balls, pillows of cotton wool, right? What could possibly be bad about clouds? Well, it turns out that they suffer from a chronic genetic case of surveillance-itis. They spy on you, not as some sort of conspiracy, but as a core part of their business model. So today, if you are browsing the web, hundreds, if not thousands, of companies are watching what you're doing, trying to learn more about you, profiling you, because that's how they make money. There's nothing more or less sinister about it than that. That's how they make money. That's their business model. And it's not just the web. This toxic business model is at the heart of all of our new everyday things. Things like a teddy bear. But not just any bear. This is a Google bear. It's a bear with microphones in its ears and cameras in its eyes that listens to your children while they're playing with it to understand them better, that looks at your children and sees your children as they're playing with it to understand them better, and then can talk to your children. And you don't even need to be in the room. Isn't that great? It's like an even better television set. Awesome. This is not a real bear. This is just a patent that they took. But it tells you the direction in which they're thinking. This is a real toy, though. This is Hello Barbie. Has anyone got one, played with one, seen one? Their kids have one? Am I talking to a room full of guys? What the? I hope not. So this is a real toy, right? And just like the bear, it can listen to your children, it can talk to your children. One of the designers of this toy, I read an article, and she was saying, I imagined a girl taking the new doll into her bedroom and closing the door. How intimate. I have no doubt she would ask Barbie all manner of those intimate questions that she wouldn't ask an adult. Which might sound really, cuddly and nice. It's a toy, it's Barbie, until you realize that all of that information is being transmitted to Toy Talk. Now that is Toy Talk Incorporated, a corporation that is listening to that kid. And it's not just toys, of course. It's our everyday things, our new everyday things, from smart televisions to wearables, the things that we wear on our persons, to the things that we drive and will soon be driving us to places. They all work by collecting information about us, by collecting data about us. Now, this by itself is not the problem. This is a fact of life. This is how modern technologies work. They collect data. And we're not going to change that, no matter what we do. The question is, who owns and controls the technologies and the data? Now, if the answer to that is we do as individuals, we own and control it, then that's great. That's us learning about ourselves. There's no problem there. And consequently, we have a democracy. If, however, the answer is corporations own and control this data, and by extension, this data is then made available to governments, then we have a very different type of social system that we're talking about. We're talking about a corporatocracy, a feudalism of corporations. Now, don't worry, because I know this is kind of deep for 9:30, right? Don't worry, this is not a decision that we have to make today, all right? Whew. Because we made this decision a few decades ago. Today, all of our data is owned and controlled by corporations, and thereby is also accessible to governments. Today, we do live in a corporatocracy. We keep hearing these terms. We're sleepwalking into this. This is going to happen. I'd hate to tell you, it's happened. We're there. We need to understand that if we're going to try and find a different path forward from where we are. Because we talk about the cloud. And when we talk about the cloud, as the Free Software Foundation says, what we're really talking about are other people's machines, right? We call them server farms, don't we? Have you ever stopped to consider what it is that's being farmed? Because if you do, you might quickly come to the conclusion that it's us. Now, if you think that that's an exaggeration, here's a very quick example. This is me visiting Forbes.com on the side, and that is Mozilla Lightbeam, which is showing me all the connections that Forbes.com is making. Even before the site loads, just their door slam, it's already connected to 40 third-party sites. I've gone onto one site. There are 40 different sites that are learning about me at this point, right? By the time it loads 58, 59, 62, 63, the number goes up. You get the idea. You go to one site. Your expectation should be that that site is the only site that knows about you, right? If that. And if you try to protect yourself from this, what does Forbes do? They do this. They say, thank you for visiting us. Yes, yeah. We noticed that you have an ad blocker enabled. Please disable it or whitelist it. Now, some people did when they first showed that, and you know what happened almost immediately afterwards? Forbes was hit by a malvertising attack. People's computers were taken over with ransomware, right? And why? Because what Forbes is telling them is they're saying, stop protecting yourself because we want to spy on you. That's what they're saying. And in case you're wondering, irony is not lost on these people. Look at the quote. There is nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency something that should not be done at all. There's no irony there whatsoever. And it's not just Forbes. Wired are doing it. Other sites are doing it. And they're doing it all in the same way. And there's a reason for that. These people have a trade lobby. It's called the Interactive Advertising Bureau, which sounds like something out of Mad Men. And they have a deal that they're trying to push these publishers to implement, which basically comes down to asking people to stop protecting themselves on the web. We can do better than this. We must do better than this. So some of us are trying. There are people around the world who are trying to tackle different aspects of this problem. I am 1/3 of a tiny 2-person and 1 husky social enterprise that are trying to work on this problem. And the way that we're approaching it is as a design problem. And our way forward is to try and raise awareness about how we could be designing these technologies differently, ethically. So what does ethical design look like? It looks something like this. It starts with a base, with everything that you build, your organizations, starting with your organizations, of respecting human rights. A simple thing that we overlook. But we can't stop there. So we go beyond that. And in the things that we make, we respect human effort. And we don't stop there. If we get to that point, then let's go further and respect the human experience. So what does that mean concretely? What kind of characteristics should our products have then? Well, at their base, they must respect your human rights. So privacy, a core human right. To do that, we must build them in a decentralized way so that people don't have to trust us because we don't have their information to begin with, right? That's the only definition of trust that matters, where you don't have to trust something. They have to be free and open, again, for the same reason. Interoperable, accessible, secure, and sustainable. Security is only one part of that, an important part, but one part of it. So we go beyond that, though. We don't stop there. We build things that are functional and convenient and reliable. If they're not convenient, it doesn't matter how many of the rights you protect or what you do, or you're free and open source, nobody gives a damn. They're not going to use it. They have to be convenient. That's what you compete on with other products. But then if you get to that point, go beyond. Build things that are delightful, right? Because our experiences matter. Whether they're experiences with people or experiences with things, they're all we have in life. And then we die. It's very arrogant, as some of us do, for example, in the free open source world sometimes, to say, we care about your rights. We don't care if it's convenient. We don't care if it takes longer. Learn the way that we do things. Arrogant. Arrogant and disrespectful of the limited grains of sand that people have in their hourglasses. Each one of those an experience, either with other people or with the things that we make. So that's ethical design. And you can go on our website and you can print out a poster and put it up at Indie Ethical Design. People have. It's up in the offices of Philips in Amsterdam, for example, in different agencies. And people are using this in their own little ways as a framework. I had someone from an agency say, I didn't work on a project because I showed them that we were violating this, the base of the pyramid. And they couldn't argue against that. These are our little wins. We need our little wins going forward. Academia is taking notice. A couple of academics reached out and said, reading this, it made us think about the human-computer interaction field and how we can apply this to human-computer interaction. Politicians, policymakers, lobbyists are taking notice. Right? I love this because this is basically an indication that this was heard in Brussels. And I wasn't necessarily the one saying it, which is good, because I can only say so much in so many places. So that's ethical design. And today, where we fail is at the base. In mainstream technology, we are building things that do not respect human rights. And then we have a very different type of design. I call this dark design. Because if you're not building things to empower people, you are building things on the backs of people that take advantage of people, where the people you're building for are the other, and you're taking advantage of that. And that's how we build mainstream technologies today. Dark design. If you want, call it Silicon Valley design. That seems to be where most of it is coming from. Whatever you call it, I think we can agree that it's quite unethical. And this is very important, this is not a bug. This is not Facebook and Google and the people there making mistakes. Oh no, Facebook did this again. Did you hear what they did? Oh, they just really violated a lot of people's privacy, and it was such a mistake again. And it seems that that mistake, though, really benefits their bottom line. How interesting, all these mistakes in the same direction, which is entirely aligned with their business model. Isn't that crazy? They keep making mistakes that benefit them and profit them. It's not a mistake. We have to understand that this is systemic. And we have to understand the system that this is part of. This is a system of monopolies, platform monopolies. This is the combination of two forces. Traditional capitalism, which is the accrual of wealth, combined with the accrual of information led by technology. This is traditional capitalism multiplied by the amplifying effect of technology, so that the inequalities that have always been in capitalism as a core part of it are now multiplied by the speed of technology, so that they are increasing exponentially, as is our technology. Shoshana Zuboff from the Harvard Business School calls this model surveillance capitalism. And for those of you that are thinking, freaking hell, Aral, it's still not 10 o'clock. And we thought we were going to hear about technology and maybe fluffy clouds. How does this tie into a social system and the way that we live? Well, there's one number, if you need it in a nutshell, to understand the issue that we're facing, the core problem that we're facing. And that number is 62. Very simple number, right? 62. Does that mean something rude in Dutch? 'Cause there's some... I hope not. I've been following this number evolve over a few years. It started out as something like, was it 82? And then it's dropped in the last 3 years. This is a number by Oxfam, a charity that works against poverty, that tries to fight poverty in the UK. And what this number is the number of individuals in the world, people, the number of people in the world who have the same wealth as half of the world's poorest population combined. So today, we live in a world where 62 of the richest people have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people. Now, let me put this into perspective for you. This, you'll see up there, is 62. You can visualize it, right? 62 people would fit onto one double-decker bus in London with room left over for others. Now, I want you to try and visualize 3.5 billion. You can't. We're not wired that way. It's so far beyond the Dunbar number that we can't even visualize it. And that, in a nutshell, is the core problem here. We don't have a technology problem. We have a capitalism problem on our hands. Because the core problem that we have is one of systemic inequality. How does this tie back into technology? Well, let's say you're one of those 62 people. Lucky you, right? What should you do? What is life like for you? Well, for one thing, there are a lot of people out there who don't have what you have, right? So it might be a good idea to maybe protect yourself a little bit. So let's start by building some walls. Right, let's build some walls around us. Thick, tall walls, yeah? But if you have thick, tall walls around you, now you can't see what's happening outside, right? And there are all these people, and they might be up to no good. Maybe we should keep an eye on them, just to make sure that everything's okay out there, right? Those crazy people, what are they up to? Let's just keep a... Does this start looking similar to something that you saw earlier? Does it start looking... that starts explaining things, doesn't it? And maybe we're okay with this. A lot of people are all right with the concept of an all-seeing magical white guy on a cloud. Maybe we'll be okay with a slightly less magical all-seeing white guy on a cloud. Maybe it's okay, right? But of course, when Mark Zuckerberg says, your privacy is dead, he's saying your privacy is dead, right? He's not saying my privacy is dead because he's busy buying up the 4 houses around his own house because his privacy isn't dead. And he's busy taping up the camera on his computer and the microphone on his computer because his privacy sure isn't dead, right? Privacy has never been dead for those with the means to afford it. And it's no different now. So, when Mark is talking to you about the fluffy cloud that he's building that wants to connect everyone, remember, that's just somebody else's machines where you're being farmed. And we've had this business model before. This is not a new business model, right? We had a very lucrative business, and I know I'm saying this in the Netherlands, so you know what I'm talking about, of selling people's bodies. Very lucrative business, right? Had it in the US, a lot of places. Still do, unfortunately. And we call this slavery, right? Selling people's bodies. And it's very rude today, right? In polite conversation. And we don't do this anymore in polite circles, right? So we are at a point, though, where we have to ask ourselves a very inconvenient, very distressing question. What do we call the business of owning and selling and monetizing everything else about a person that makes them who they are, apart from their physical body? We don't care about physical bodies anymore. So passé. So like 1800s, right? But that's the business model of mainstream technology today. Call it what you will probably agree with me that it is quite colonial in nature. How many of you have been following Free Basics, Facebook's Free Basics? We know Facebook's quite philanthropical, they want to help the world. So they wanted to bring internet, free internet to India. And inexplicably, the Indians said, no, we don't want this. Wow, why would they do that? Well, it turns out that it wasn't really the internet. This is kind of like the white man bringing the fire. There's always a little asterisk with terms and conditions attached. And it's always terms and conditions. So apparently it wasn't really the internet, but kind of a Facebook net with Facebook and a few other hand-picked sites that they could access, where Facebook would be watching everything that they're doing. So what does that mean? It means that the cost of being poor is to either have no internet or to have a Western corporation watch what you're doing. So the Indians said, no, thank you. We're okay. We're good, thanks, Mark. Thank you so much. You go back to taping up your microphone now. And what happened? Silicon Valley collectively lost their shit. That's a technical term. This is Mark Andreessen. I can't say his name properly. I've been practicing for years. He's a very wealthy man. He's a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. And he said, anti-colonialism. Isn't that a great term? Anti-colonialism has been economically catastrophic for the Indian people for decades. Why stop now? Why stop being anti-colonialist? These people, right? They don't appreciate anything we give them, right? Fucking hell, really. He sits on the board of Facebook. This is digital imperialism. This is the system that we have. So that's the problem. I've probably thoroughly depressed you all by now. But it's better that we see it so we can do something about it, right? So what can we do about it? What are the solutions? Let's move beyond the problem. It's important that we articulate the problem simply and clearly, but let's move beyond it. The problem is broad spectrum. The solutions have to be broad spectrum. It's not just a technology thing. We can't fix it with just technology. We need legislation. And if we're going to have legislation, the legislators must understand the core concepts, which we don't. Starting with, what is the self in the era that we live in the digital era? So this is you, right? And this is how we normally draw the boundaries of the self, around the boundaries of our biological selves, our physical bodies. And over many years and over many struggles, we have built a body of laws. We have documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that have been ratified into national legislature. And we have built a law system that can execute on this and protect any abuses of the self. So we know, in broad strokes at least, what human rights are, right? So things somehow, though, change when this little guy comes into the picture. Your phone, your trusty smartphone. Because we don't understand the nature of our conversations, of the nature of our interactions with our technologies and our phones, for example. So is it a conversation? When you have an idea and you want to write it down in the Notes app of your phone, do you say to your phone, hey phone, I have an idea, I want to write it down in the Notes app, and the phone says, hey, thank you, yes, all right, I'll write it down in your Notes app. Conversation between two actors. Now, if that's the case, then any surveillance is surveillance in the old-fashioned sense of the word. It's signals capture, right? Like it or not, that's what surveillance has always really been. However, what if our interaction with technology is different? What if when I have a thought and I want to write it down somewhere, like in the Notes app, I actually extend my mind by storing that thought on my device? Now, if this is not a conversation, but an extension of the self, then it would make perfect sense to extend the boundaries of the self to include the technologies by which we augment and extend our biological capabilities. Now, if we do that, what does surveillance become? It's no longer signals capture. It is an assault on the self. And again, we have a body of laws and a system to execute on those laws where we know how to protect the self. So when people tell you we need digital laws, we need new digital rights, we do not. We need to apply the human rights that we have in the digital era. The difference between those two things is night and day. Those who want to take away your rights want you to think that you need new digital rights, which will not have the same protections. Those who want to protect your rights want to try and apply the human rights that we have to the digital era. So to start, let's start by thinking about extending the rights of the person to the technologies by which we extend our biological selves. And we also have to understand the nature of data. Think of it this way. I have a tiny little statue, right? If I have enough data about this statue, I can take a 3D printer and I can create a replica of this statue. Now think about it. What can I do if I have enough data about you? I don't want to 3D print you, hint. But I can simulate you. And that's what a profile is. Maybe today we're in the early days, and those simulations are not great. But you add the advances that we're making in artificial intelligence, you add the advances that we're making in quantum computing to those simulations, the creation of those simulations, and slowly, but, well, not even slowly, very quickly, we're getting to a point where they're going to be very good simulations of you. Ones that you don't own. Ones that corporations own. Data about a thing, if you have enough of it, starts becoming the thing. Data about people is people. When we're talking about personal data, data about people, we're talking about people. Data is a euphemism, one that we need to stop using. If you replace data about people with people, then the decisions you make will take a very different feel to them. The conversations you have will be very, very different. The answers have to be regulatory. Right now, our rights are being abused on a daily basis as the norm in the mainstream of technology. There's a systemic violation of them. So why aren't we regulating, right? Well, some people say we should remain neutral and then we'll see what happens. And usually it's some magical thing called the market, I think, will just figure it out for us. But as Desmond Tutu says, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If someone's being oppressed and you say, I'm neutral, you're not neutral. You've chosen the side of the oppressor. In this case, if it needs spelling out, the elephant is Silicon Valley and the mouse is us. And I don't care what company you work for, even if you do work for a Silicon Valley company, you're an individual first. So why aren't we regulating? Could it possibly be because the same people, you know these people, that we elect to defend our rights act like cheerleaders for Silicon Valley? Could it be that the same people that we elect to protect our rights end up saying things like, if you care about net neutrality, you're like the Taliban? Could that have anything to do with the fact that Oettinger's donut consists nearly solely of lobby meetings with telecommunications companies? And then we pass laws in Europe that effectively destroy net neutrality. We call these things public-private partnerships. We call it multi-stakeholderism. We call it co-regulation, right? Multi-stakeholderism is a great term until you think, wait a minute, not everyone's stakes are the same. Google can afford to send an employee to every meeting that happens at multi-stakeholder events around the world. How many of those events can NGOs, civic societies, etc., or people who care about the human rights aspects attend? Just out of pure economics. So co-regulation, inviting Google to the table to say, Google, how should we regulate you on privacy? And Google says, well, we have a few ideas about that. Thank you very much. My friend John will demonstrate. Call it what you will. What it is institutional corruption. We're not talking corruption, here's some money under the table. We're talking about a system of influence, right? We're talking about the influence of corporate finance in public policy making, which is at the heart of the problem. Until we can remove corporate finance from public policy making, we cannot regulate. We are neutered. How important is this issue? In the US, Lawrence Lessig, who's also the founder of Creative Commons, last year made a bid to run for president on this one issue. Of course, the Democratic Party just had a fit, and they were like, you can't do that, and shut him down. But that's how important it is. Because what we need to understand, again, is that we're not sleepwalking into something. We're not getting somewhere. There are currently secretive trade deals, like the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which will take this system that I've just explained to you, this corporatocracy, and enshrine it in law with policies like investor-state dispute settlement clauses. What this means is that a corporation can sue a democratically elected government if that government takes decisions that benefit their citizens and protect their citizens, but are bad for the interests of the investors of that corporation. Already, Canada has had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the tobacco industry because they were protecting their citizens, the health of their citizens. And the tobacco industry said, sorry, that's bad for our investors. We've created a system, an economic system, that thrives off of our individual calamity. This does not make sense. What about the privacy community itself if we're talking about institutional corruption? Well, there was a conference recently called CPDP, Computers, Privacy, and Data Protection, right? Sounds like something where they really care about computers, privacy, and data protection. And they said, would you be on the closing panel? The president of the European Parliament is going to be there, and Shoshana Zuboff, who I mentioned, surveillance capitalism, coined the term, is going to be there. Mark Rotenberg is going to be there. And I have huge respect for Mark and Shoshana, so I said, sure, that's an honor. Thank you. Of course, I'd love to. And then I looked on their website at their sponsors. Oh, okay. Makes sense, right? They care about privacy, just not in the way that you think. Google, the United States mission to the European Union. I guess the NSA was unavailable that day. And some of you might have heard of this one, Palantir. Do you know what Palantir is? Do you know what the reference is? They're not even hiding it, right? What does this business do? Palantir is the name of the all-seeing stone in Lord of the Rings used by the evil wizard to control things and see things. They're not even hiding it, people. They're like, look, this is what we are. Oh, will you sponsor our privacy conference? Sure. And we're doing this all the time. Tor, right? We love Tor. Tor has a huge amount of legitimacy, right? Made a deal with Facebook. And what does that mean? They start getting public relations like this. Facebook says you can be social and secure. Facebook gets built-in Tor support for secure socializing. Those are not the worst. This is the worst. Facebook now available through Tor for privacy, ramped up privacy. I mean, seriously, that connecting to Facebook with Tor is like taking some sort of secret tunnel to a glass house. It's ridiculous. And those of us with the most legitimacy are letting ourselves be used by this. Open whisper systems, you all know Moxie, I'm sure. Signal, it's probably the one messaging system that you should all be using right now. He has more legitimacy than probably anyone in this field. What happens? They're building stuff for WhatsApp, for Facebook. What is that in terms of public relations? This, WhatsApp gets privacy boost. What happens if Facebook implemented end-to-end encryption and zero-knowledge systems for all of their products, right? What would happen to Facebook? They'd go bankrupt, right? So if a thing, if implemented properly, will make you go bankrupt, will make your corporation go bankrupt, then that corporation saying they care about that thing can only be the illusion of the thing, not the thing itself. So they get wonderful press. Forget Apple, blah, blah, blah. WhatsApp just switched on encryption for 1 billion people. On Bruce's blog, there was a great comment. Metadata is the name of the game, and end-to-end encryption is the honeypot, right? And how important is metadata? Well, according to some, ex-spooks, they kill people based on it. This is the former CIA director, Michael Hayden. So we have to stop being useful idiots, especially those of us who have legitimacy in this area. That's the reason they got Moxie to do it. It's not because Facebook can't build it and then he built it for Google. It's not because Google can't build it themselves. They would never get the same public relations as having Moxie build it. And these things are related. The corporate side and the government side, we kind of think of them as separate, and we focus a lot on, government bad, 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 bad. Corporations, well, I guess they're fine. But as Bruce Schneier says, the NSA didn't wake up and say, let's just spy on everybody. They looked up and said, wow, corporations are spying on everybody. Let's get ourselves a cut of that. We're being left behind here, right? So the solutions have to be financial as well. There's a reason mainstream technologies are built in the centralized ways that they are. It's because they're subsidized by venture capital, right? And that's a centralized system in and of itself. Here's how it works. Our young, fresh-faced Zuck has a new startup in Harvard, right? And he needs money for it. So what does he do? He goes to a venture capitalist. That's not an illustration, that's a photo. They all look like that. And he says, hey, venture capitalist, in about 5 years' time, I think I'll have a few 100 million people using my platform. How much money will you give me today for when we sell those people in 5 years' time? And the venture capitalist says, Mark, well, I believe that you can deliver on what you promised. And don't worry, because I've also hedged my bets on 9 other companies. But I'll give you 5 million, just like I gave the 9 other companies. Because I know that one of those companies is going to be $1 billion company when we sell the hundreds of millions of users that company gets in 5 years' time. And that's why they give him the money. And that's the sale. In venture capital, the sale happens at the beginning, not the end. And then Mark has a huge task in front of him. He has to convince us that not only has he not sold us, but that he will not sell us, so that we help him build the network that he has just sold. Does that make sense? You understand that, you understand mainstream technology today, right? And that's the con. He's very, very persuasive, and we say, sure, Mark, yeah, let's help you build this. This is the only point where we can actually kill a social network, for example, like Facebook, because network effects have not kicked in. Once network effects kick in, none of us has any individual support, or even if 100 of us left, it wouldn't matter at that point. So in a few years' time, the venture capitalist comes back and concludes the sale, finalizes the sale with an initial public offering to the public, or with the acquisition, or an acquisition by another company with the same business model. So if we want alternatives, we need to find alternative ways of funding the alternatives. If you hear that someone is building a new thing and it's all about protecting your privacy and they really care about, protecting our human rights, and they've just taken 5 million venture capital, the only word that you should really respond with is bullshit. Because even if their hearts are in the right place, they don't have the control to keep to that social mission. The investors do. And the solutions can be technological. There's a reason this comes at the very end, because it's usually what we think about first, and we need to stop doing that, right? And that's where design comes into it. And when I talk about design, I don't mean about, making things pretty. Please, let's stop thinking about design that way. Design is holistic. It's about everything from the design of the organization up. If you don't have that level of control, you have no control over your end product. So what does Silicon Valley design look like today, the dominant design? It looks something like this. It's really yummy, it's really beautiful, it's shiny, you want to take it and you just want to lick it, right? And it's addictive. And it's addictive by design. This is one of the most successful books in Silicon Valley. It's called Hooked, and the subtitle is How to Build Habit-Forming Products. This is not a warning guide, this is an instruction manual, okay? So how do we do this, guys? All design is about influencing behavior. Design without ethics is manipulation. It isn't design at all. It's decoration. It's taking something that tastes bitter and maybe trying to sweeten it up. It's taking something that looks unpalatable and maybe trying to make it look acceptable to some degree. Decoration perpetuates an unequal, unpalatable status quo. Design is what alters it. So what about those of us that care? Free and open source, right? Free and open source design. Well, free and open source design it starts out with the best of intentions, right? And then suddenly it starts just growing, and suddenly we have preferences, and then we can do amazing things with it. But there are pitfalls, and there's something missing here. If only someone could create an adapter for the, there we go. And, you know, you can look at this and you can laugh. You can say, oh, yeah, I've seen free and open source stuff, man. It's so hard to use. And this isn't bad design. This is great design for the target audience. Free and open source people are designing things for themselves, which is really the only people we can ever design for. And they're designing them beautifully for themselves. What is madness is to then suggest or think that they will also become usable, beautiful solutions for everyday people who just want everyday things, who don't care about tweaking it, who don't care about how it works, who want clean clothes, not to learn how a washing machine works, right? And, of course, we have a big problem with whiteness and maleness and middle-agedness in the industry, in what we do. Again, you can only really design for yourselves. So if you're a bunch of white, middle-aged guys like me designing just for yourselves, then it's going to be great solutions for you and probably not for anyone else. Diversity is not a charity. The reason we must be so focused on improving diversity in our communities is because it's the only way where we can create alternative products that protect human rights, that are good for the world, without being colonial in our nature. By creating small teams, diverse teams, that by designing for themselves, design things that are usable by a diverse audience. So, to summarize it, free and open source says, hey, oh, you have some bread, you just made some toast, and you're like, yeah, I need something to put some butter on my toast. And free and open source says, here's a chainsaw! Take the chainsaw, butter your toast, let me show you how to do it. And you go, could I have something a little less than a chainsaw? Because I'm kind of afraid of the chainsaw, and I think I might hurt myself with the chainsaw. And they go, no, have a chainsaw, learn how to use the chainsaw. You don't deserve our chainsaw. So when we talk about ethical design, we can't just talk about the base. It's cross-cutting. We're not talking about different products that fit into different layers. We're talking about your product fitting into all of those layers, right? That's ethical design in theory. What does it look like in practice? Because I don't just go around talking about this stuff. I've been coding since I was 7, right? I make things. I would maybe much rather be making a game if everyone that came before us didn't fuck things up so badly. It wasn't my idea to trawl the sewer of the web to try and fix things. But here we are. So what does it look like in practice, right? One, we need to block the abuses. Just like we need regulation to block the abuses, we need technical regulation as well. And then we also need to create alternatives. So we can say to people, look, it can be different. You're not going to hear about this from Silicon Valley, but it can be different. So what are we doing? This is our roadmap. About 3 weeks ago, we released our first product on iOS called Better, which is a content blocker, which basically protects you as you are browsing the web from tracking. It's not an ad blocker. I don't care about ads. I care about tracking. I care about ads if they're obtrusive and they violate the experience and the effort layers of the ethical design pyramid. I don't care about them just because they're ads, right? It's free and open source. So those of you who want to download it and build it and run it for yourselves, please go to source.indie, download it, and if you want to contribute back, that'll be great. You don't have to, of course. But it's also available for sale on the App Store, and that's by design. If we're going to build alternatives, we need to remain independent. And that means that we cannot be sponsored by Google and Facebook. That means that we cannot actually create a blocker and then work for the ad industry, which is the reason we built this. Because when Apple came out with native content blockers, I was like, oh, great, that's going to be awesome. And the first ones that came out, they were built by ex-advertising agencies to block ads and then to go to advertisers and say, do you want me to unblock your ads? Pay me some money. I think that's kind of like extortion, but I'm not sure. And it's doing really great. Even though you can download it and play with it for free or run it for free and do whatever you want, people are actually getting it because of the convenience, which is the higher levels of that pyramid. And it's got 5-star reviews, over like 50 reviews or something on the App Store right now. And you can view it on the web. So you can go to better.fyi. And here's what it does. By blocking these trackers, the side effect, which isn't really a side effect, is that it also speeds up your experience, and it results in far less data being downloaded. And now remember, it's just the three of us doing this, which means that we can act differently, right? So remember when Wired had their ad blocker, so they were blocking your content blockers? So we basically said, okay, Wired, here's what we're doing. You see that rule over there? It's in Markdown. See that rule? That blocks your blocker. So it's a blocker. In your fucking face, Wired. And then we also said, here's what you can do next in this cat and mouse game, and here's what we're going to do next. And you know how this ends? The end game, if we're playing chess, let's play chess, right? How does it end? We remove Wired from the web, because we can. You don't see any more links to Wired. If they are displaying this level of animosity for your rights, or if any site is, that's where it ends, because we still have control on the web. And I tweeted about this. It got very big. And only one member of the tech press wrote about it, Motherboard, right? Although I have personal friends who work at The Guardian, etc. Could it possibly have anything to do with the fact that all of their business models are the same model? And we've actually gone to the IAB and said, no deal. You have no deal, right? And I have this little tool that I run that goes and looks at the most popular sites on the web and finds all the trackers automatically. So I don't do this manually. And that's where we create the list of trackers. But the list of trackers is not a database. We need to learn about this stuff. It needs to be interesting. So each one is like a little article. That's what we do manually. We go in and we say, what is this thing? What is it doing? Why are we blocking it, right? And then we look at individual ones as well. So the worst site that we found from the Alexa Top 5000, okay, in terms of number of trackers, how many do you think? Throw out some numbers before we get to the top of the screen. You're a pessimist. It's not that bad. It's bad, but it's not that bad. 172. That was just on one page, being loaded for 1 minute, at most, right? Because I cut it off at that point. That's our cloud of shame, LifeBuzz by LifeBuzz Media. They have 172 trackers. Now, they also love to boast about their statistics. Hey, we get 250 million page views, man. It's awesome. And 87% are from the United States. And we get mobile traffic, 82%. So we were able to combine these statistics with statistics available from elsewhere just to calculate the cost. How much does this cost people, just the trackers? In the US, for just mobile phone users, because of how much they pay for data, it costs people over $4 million a month, every month, just to download those trackers. Recently, AdBlock Plus got sued by Axel Springer, one of the biggest publishers in Europe. And their lawyers, the publisher's lawyers, actually said the core business of the plaintiff is to deliver ads to its visitors. Journalistic content is just a vehicle to get readers to view the ads. So what happens if our free press today is basically bait? What does that say about our societies? And there is hope. We also have a cloud of fame that we awarded to the Deck Network, which is an ad network. But they don't spy on people. They display one little tiny ad that's non-behavioral, non-tracking, and they do it on sites that have the same kind of theme. And that's how they ensure relevance. So that's better, but we still have a long way to go. But that's step one. And these have to happen at the same time. Block abuses, create alternatives. And Walter mentioned last year, we launched a pre-alpha of Heartbeat. Heartbeat is a social network that doesn't spy on you. Again, free and open source, and it hasn't been touched for the last 7 months because we've been building better and we're 2 people and a husky. But again, how do we make it simple? This is the first experience you have with it, right? The first time you launch it. And how do we get you on board as quickly as you can, as nicely as you can, and then how do you get started as quickly as possible, right? You don't have to compile anything, you don't have to download this, that, and that. It's just one click and then you're up. So there's a code here for the pre-alpha, which wouldn't even be in the final one. And this is your account being created. Boom. You can see the public posts on there, and there's me dragging an image to share with my friends. Technically, if you care about how it works, it's basically, at its core, like BitTorrent sync, right? We're creating a mesh of shared space. And I just save a file on mine, which is a message, and it syncs to everyone else's. You don't need to care about that, though. As far as anyone cares, it's a beautiful messaging application where they can talk to their friends privately, and it goes from their machine to the other person's machine. So that's Heartbeat, right? So those are the two things we need to do to put ethical design into practice. We're trying. We need a lot of other people to be trying. So, in closing, clouds are not the solution. Clouds are the problem. We need a new topology that doesn't have privileged centers, an egalitarian topology, a decentralized topology, so that when Facebook says to share your photo with a friend, you must share it with me, we say, bullshit, Facebook. If you want to share a photo with your friend, share it with your friend directly. And to do this, we must move beyond centralization. It's a loss of imagination. We must move beyond the way centralized systems are funded, venture capital. We must move beyond worshiping at the altar of Silicon Valley. And we must move beyond colonialism as the means by which we design things for others, which means moving beyond an understanding and moving beyond our own privilege. Because at its core, what we're trying to do is move beyond inequality to create a sustainable system. And to do that, we just simply have to move beyond bullshit. Because this is what we've done. We've taken a bullshit seed and planted it, and we got a bullshit tree. And then we climbed up into the branches, and now we're wondering, why does the fruit taste like bullshit? Well, there's a reason for that, because bullshit fruit is the only kind of fruit you get from a bullshit tree. Now, some of us who benefit from the system feel that if we decorate the tree, it will mask the taste and the smell of the fruit, but it doesn't. Some of us who truly care feel that if we prune the branches, it will change the nature of the tree, but it doesn't. So here's what we need to do. We need to take a few steps to one side, some of us, not all of us, and plant a new tree based on principles of equality and rationality and social justice. And then we'll get a very different type of tree, one that we don't have to decorate, because it will be beautiful based on those ideals. And the fruits we get from it will be diverse. And here's the key point, though. We can't stop there. We need to build a bridge from our tree to the bullshit tree. So those who don't have the means to do what we did, who don't have the time, who may not have the ability, can come and join us on our tree. Because that is the bridge between the centralized world of old and the decentralized world that we must move towards. A world built on reason, on equality, on human rights, and on democracy. That is the world that I want to live in. That is the world that I believe we deserve. And that is the world that I challenge us to create. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for an inspiring talk, Aral. Thank you very much.
Welcome,
Here's a
Walter. Thank you
small
for having
present.
me. Oh, wow.
There was certainly some food for
Alcohol.
thought. We don't have time for questions, but you will be here
I'm here the
throughout
whole day. I don't bite. Come by and say hi.
So if you have any questions, you can talk to Aral later today.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.